Hello, Gary Rogers here. Welcome to the Spiritual Heritage Channel. Today I'm wanting to talk to you about a New Zealand lawyer, JAD Adams, John Adams, and an Australian healing evangelist, John Alexander Dowie. JAD Adams was born in Scotland and moved to New Zealand with his family, settling in Dunedin. He was from a poor family but studied hard and gained a law degree and set up a law firm with his brother, and the remnants of that firm are still in operation today in Dunedin. J.A.D. Adams had a disease, that what he described as a wasting palsy, and a doctor had said to him that he needed to move to a rural area and live on the edge of a forest because he was actually going to die. His wife also had physical issues. She was lame, partly lame from age 9, but her condition got worse, and by 1886-87 she couldn't walk from the front door to the letterbox without assistance. John Alexander Dowie had a ministry in Sydney initially, in the suburb of Newtown. He was a congregational minister there. He was very frustrated that 40 members of his congregation had died in what they describe as a plague, and it reminds me very much of the COVID-19 virus that we have today, but maybe in some respects it was worse. And he sought God about this, and because he knew this shouldn't be, that his people in his congregation shouldn't be dying, and he believed that Jesus was the same yesterday, today and forever, and if Jesus healed 2,000 years ago, he could heal today. As he was coming to this revelation, some people came to him and took him to the house of a little girl who was dying of this disease. She had high fever and she was foaming at the mouth, foaming blood. And Dowie prayed for her, and the girl looked like she had actually passed away, and the mother thought she had, but Dowie said that she had been healed and ordered that a cup of cocoa be brought. He then snapped his fingers and the little girl opened her eyes and she drank the cup of cocoa and then went back to sleep, and she was fine. Her brother and sister, who were also in the house, they also had the disease and they too were healed. From that point on, no one in Dowie's congregation died of the disease. Dowie's ministry in Australia continued to grow and he moved to Melbourne. He always had controversy surrounding him because he was so outspoken against things like alcohol. Anyway, he came to New Zealand in 1887. J.A.D. Adams had heard about his ministry, and he actually was on a route to Australia. He went to Dunedin to catch a ship to Australia when he found that Dowie had already arrived in Dunedin, and he received prayer from Dowie and was 100% healed. He lived well into his 90s. While he was in Invercargill a short time later and Dowie was still in Dunedin, his wife too had received prayer, and Adams got news that his wife had been healed. Dowie, when he went back to Australia, decided to move to the USA, and he came back to New Zealand in 1888 en route to the USA. He came to and stayed with the Adams family in Dunedin, also came to my home city of Christchurch, then went back to Auckland to catch the ship to USA. While he was there, it was brought to his notice that there was a letter circulating in Christchurch with accusations against him. He then took a ship, which was a 3-day journey, back to Christchurch to answer to this letter. JAD Adams came up from Dunedin and a large meeting was called, and 500 attended that meeting. After hearing the charges against Dowie and Dowie's response, there was a vote, and the audience voted 500 to 16 in favour of Dowie and endorsed his ministry to the USA and prayed for him. Dowie then returned to Auckland where his family was waiting and took a delayed ship to USA. In USA, Dowie's ministry was extremely successful and awakened USA to the healing ministry. There were early healing evangelists in USA, such as Carrie Judd Montgomery. He certainly wasn't the first, but he was the most well known and awakened the church in the USA to the fact that Jesus still heals today. Unfortunately, Dowie, it got to his head. He was continuously up against persecution. In 1 year, he was arrested 99 times. The charge against him that caused these arrests was that he was practicing medicine without a license because people were being healed by his prayer. And this eventually got to him. The success of it all got to him. He also became obsessed with building a utopian town called Zion in Illinois near Chicago. And he was in charge of the finances and he mismanaged the finances. Eventually he had a stroke and died. And of course the healing ministry came into disrepute. JAD Adams actually tried to correct Dowie, and this is a letter that he wrote to a newspaper in New Zealand where he said, "And it may perhaps interest the same readers to know that no one has been more earnest in pointing out Mr. Dowie's errors, but I have done this to Mr. Dowie himself, personally and by letter." Jesus told us how to handle situations where we have things against other believers in the body of Christ, and we are to go to them. If they don't listen, we take along another person and try to talk to them direct. These days there's often a lot of criticism, particularly with the internet, one ministry to another, putting another one down. And to me this is very sad. One sad situation recently, a very large movement, Christian movement that I really respect, is criticising another Christian movement that I also really respect and love. And this is not a good thing. It's not what Jesus said to do. And JAD Adams, we can be proud of him that he did things the right way. He went to Dowie himself. He did it to his face. And unfortunately, Dowie didn't listen. He became very deceived. He actually believed he was Elijah III, and it resulted in the demise of his ministry. JAD Adams started an early charismatic church in Dunedin around 1900. They were run similar to a Brethren church without a pastor, but they operated in the spiritual gifts. And he was a real pioneer, and he also was often in defence, like an apologist for the Pentecostal movement, When Smith Wigglesworth came to New Zealand in 1922, he received a lot of criticism, particularly in Christchurch and Dunedin, and JAD Adams was the one who defended him and wrote many letters to the newspapers in defence of Wigglesworth and the healing campaign. In his 80s, JAD Adams moved to Australia. There was an early Pentecostal movement there, which was started by a woman by the name of Sarah Jane Lancaster. She too was a wonderful lady who ministered in the gifts of the Spirit, but also reached out to the poor. And JAD Adams joined her movement. It was renamed the Apostolic Faith Mission, and JAD Adams for 3 years was president of that movement. There's a photo in the Flower Heritage Museum in Chicago which has a photograph of JAD Adams alongside Seymour, the man involved in the Azusa Street revival, with John G. Lake, the famous healing evangelist, and also F.F. Bosworth, a very well-known healing evangelist as well. And JAD Adams is among this group. And you look at this and you think, well, why would a New Zealander be among these group of famous men? But I think he deserves to be there. He was such a wonderful example in that early spiritual revival in New Zealand. So I hope this video has been of interest to you, and thank you for watching the Spiritual Heritage channel. There are other videos on my channel. If you would like to have a look at those, I hope those too would be an encouragement to you.